Hi everyone. My name is Ravi Gupta. I'm part of Intellecap team. Intellecap is based out of India. It's an advisory and impact-focused organization working on the climate space, agri, energy, and we're also part of Avishkar Capital, and we have presence over Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, implementing multiple projects across climate domain. Funding, some of those are also involve funding of the project. So I'll be the moderator for this session. There's some uh, housekeeping rules, like we'll be taking questions on the chat. So request everyone to put their question, queries, or any kind of recommendations on the chat box, and we'll take up those. And I'll then quickly introduce my co-panelist. So I have Sonakshi Tripathi joining from Nestle India. Sonakshi is a seasoned sustainability practitioner with a background in farming and agribusiness. He's currently working as a sustainability manager with Nestle, driving sustainable procurement initiative towards their net zero roadmap. Prior to Nestle, Sonakshi has worked with Olam as a sustainability lead for India. She has a rich experience in driving strategic projects to achieve SDGs. Her expertise lies in collaborating with global, local stakeholders for achieving joint objectives. And cited past projects showcased and recognized by multiple platforms like CII, India, and multiple industries organizations. She's also one of the very few certified SRP trainers in India. So welcome and thanks for joining, Sonakshi. We have another co-panelist, Mr. Anil Nadik. He is the co-founder of the Trace6 Technologies, based out of India. And Anil is a technology enthusiast. He's currently focusing on traceability and artificial intelligence and mix of technologies to enhance productivity, and kind of bringing in efficiency in agriculture sector, working with multiple clients across multiple subsectors of agriculture. Thank you, Anil, for joining.
Thank you for having me today. Thank you.
To start with the session, I'll just provide a brief context about what we're going to discuss in this next 1 hour. So this session is about role of technology to reduce emissions across the agri supply chain, basically decarbonization. So regarding this, Intellecap and IDH have undertaken a study last year to identify what are the technologies and how technologies could be identified into a clusters, so that the corporates or even smallholder farmer groups or government can adopt these technologies or facilitate to bring in to reduce the impact of GHG emissions over agriculture. So I'll just start the session with a quick presentation, quick slide deck of around 10, which will take around 10 minutes to set up the context, and then we'll discuss details. We'll check with the practitioners, which we have Sonakshi and Anilji. They will provide us more details on what their organization are doing and about the overall ecosystems to scale the implementation of technologies. So I'll just present a short slide deck. I believe this is visible. Yeah. So this is the slide deck is based out of, as I told, this is based out of the findings of the study which Intellecap and IDH has undertaken, focusing on technology. So in the next 10 slide, we'll just discuss on two broad aspects. One is the impact of climate change on agri and food sector, how corporates and organizations are responding, and what are the challenges they are facing in achieving their commitments, and how technology can play a role. What are the basic technologies or kind of bouquet of technologies which can help them. So just to provide a brief context, climate change is impacting the sector. Both the agriculture sector is contributor to the climate change, is also bearing the risks and adverse impact of the climate change. So as we see, around 1/3 of the global GHG emission, which is around 16 to 18 gigaton carbon, is contributed by agri sector. and it is in the absence of any efforts, it may reach to 30 gigaton. And the impact of this could be seen like even a rise of 2 degree rise of 2 degrees Celsius in a temperature can reduce the yield of cocoa by around 80 to 90%. Similarly, in coffee and wheat, like in wheat, every 1 degree rise increase in the temperature can impact the yield and the outcome. Similarly, it will impact the productivity in livestock and aqua sector too. So these are kind of impacts which ultimately forcing corporates and even the supply chain to adopt some kind of technologies or practices towards sustainability to overcome the impact of negative impact of the climate change. Second, we'll just contextualize into kind of what are the risks these organizations are faced, because uh, the organization, the corporates, they deals with multiple smallholder farmers, and by working with their suppliers, so ultimately the impact uh, reaches out to the smallholder farmers. That's why the risks are quite significant, and even this is shown in the materiality metrics where climate change, sustainability, sustainable sourcing, these are at the high priority segment, which are important to stakeholder and to the businesses also. So there are three kind of risks which are identified. These are reputational, climate-related, financial risk, because uh, now the ESG scores, TCFD, these are given high priority. So getting funding from the sources like debt and these are also have impact. Like if the company is not taking up sustainable measures or not doing something to reduce the impact, so the climate also, the getting finance also impacted. Last is the supply chain and procurement risk, which is obvious as the increased temperature is impacting the productivity. The supply chain is also impacting because of this. So then we see like to overcome the risk and to recognize the risk, most of the corporates are declaring their net zero commitment. We have provided some of the examples here, but there are multiple. So around 550 agri-food sector companies across globe have come out with some kind of targets which they already declared and with certain timelines. It's like here we have for Nestle, PepsiCo, Mondelez, uh, who have committed to become net zero, to a transition to net zero by 2050. Then, given these targets and the commitments, the major obstacle is the scope 3 emission, which I believe most of the audience might be knowing. The scope 3 emission, which is indirectly linked with the value chain and where which is associated with the farm gate. So, and where most of the suppliers and farmers are associated with the kind of practices which is followed in the farm. So, to reduce emissions out of those, the transportation till farm gate. So, the scope 3 contributes around 90 to 95% or more than 90% for any agri corporate. And there are some challenges which have been highlighted, like lack of availability of reliable and specific data, high and marginal abatement cost of the technologies, even identification of the suitable technologies to ascertain that the reduction will be visible after implementation. Then poor last mile connectivity, some infrastructural challenges, convincing and aligning large supplier base, because most of the corporates procure from multiple suppliers who are spread and who provide commodities to different kind of corporates. So convincing and aligning these supplier base is a challenge, and definitely concern over increased cost. So these are some of the challenges identified. We'll discuss these in more details when we have a kind of panel discussion with our panelists. In the study, so then we discussed about the climate impact part. Now we'll discuss about the technology part, how technology can play a role. So this in the study, IDH and Intellecap assessed multiple technologies, grouped the technologies into 13 potential clusters, and then based on their feasibility and efficiency matrix, we highlighted some key clusters which may have direct impact on reducing emissions and also increasing productivity. So we also, so there are some slides in the next 7 slides. We will be presenting kind of 7 technology clusters. 5 are those which are high impact clusters, and 2 are enabling clusters, which kind of have reporting or accounting solutions, which technology can bring in. And after this, like after discussing each of the technology in some detail, we'll just present kind of what are the impact of these technologies in adaptation and resilience front. So the first cluster we have is low carbon inputs. These include both digital and non-digital technology. These include technologies like alternative fertilizer, controlled fertilizer, biochar, alternative feeds, feed additives. So these are some of the technologies include kind of product which are innovative, and some of these are also include technologies like app to monitor the ruminant cycle, better to bring in the better absorption ratio, those things. And how these technologies reduce, like the reduction in the use of synthetic fertilizers, prevent soil carbon loss, prevents deforestation by reducing or by using alternative feeds, so to reduce the or prevent the deforestation associated with soy or rice. So based on certain studies, we also identified some of the potential for some technologies, the decarbonization potential, which is around 30 to 50% from the business as usual scenario. However, for each of these clusters, there are cost, complexity, and capability challenges. So definitely there are some costs associated with these technologies, which initially these might be higher, like for any practices or practice change when we shift from synthetic fertilizer to regenerative or to organic, there might be some cost associated in the initial phase, but later on it will get normalized and will be substituted by the increase in yield. Then there are complexity and capability challenges. Complexity like lack of understanding regarding the use of application or the complexity associated with the technologies, because this has to be used by suppliers and the farmers. And then capability of the implementing organization or the suppliers or the farmer groups to implement or to use that. Similarly, same kind of information has been provided for other technology clusters like upstream renewable energy. It included key technologies like solar-based irrigation, renewable technology for mechanization, transportation, ventilation energy use in livestock and aquaculture. So ultimately, it will reduce fossil fuel usage. And then it will have certain kind of decarbonization potential. Again, cost and capability challenges are there. But in the session, we'll also discuss what are the best ways or what are the potential recommendation to overcome these challenges. Then the third technology is the waste management cluster. It includes farm waste management technologies like microbe-based decomposition, pyrolysis, fermentive oil plant-based refineries, biochemical, chemical conversion. So use of alternative package, use of farm waste as a packaging material. So like here we have example from Nestle that we are using cocoa pulp and other kind of core component of the fruits, which are earlier treated as waste, but now there have been some product kind of made out of them using some innovative technologies for better extraction. So these technologies are bringing in some efficiency and also some kind of innovativeness by replacing the existing technology. The fourth technology cluster is the energy efficiency, which is quite matured, and we see the application. These are kind of technologies like smart water controllers, which uses some kind of AI or mechanization, machine learning model to just monitor the irrigation, which are implemented across South Asia and Africa in some of the fields, mostly in horticultural crops. And then there are some energy efficiency solution for downstream. Next and last high impact technology cluster is the precision agriculture, which is there are multiple technology provided in these clusters, and most of these technologies are kind of providing better efficiency, like preservation of uh, produce at the farm level using cool boxes or smart water controller, again energy saving pumps. Then in livestock management, there are technologies providing kind of tracking of livestock health and feeding patterns. And then in the precision aquaculture, similar technologies to provide the kind of feed mix to be used for the better output from the aquaculture crops. Then we have two enabling technology cluster like GHG accounting and carbon financing platforms. GHG accounting is the core requirement because in agriculture sector, we have multiple technologies which are maybe used now or previously, but most of these technologies doesn't track the emissions or kind of sustainability aspect they are bringing in. So geospatial monitoring of biomass and soil carbon and emission accounting software, these two kind of broader technologies are identified under these clusters, which can provide aerial imagery or kind of soil impact in soil, increase in the organic soil carbon. So that could be tracked and then could be analyzed using satellite based monitoring or a kind of GIS or LiDAR imagery. The last kind of technology cluster is carbon financing platform, which is which these platforms or kind of carbon removal could be done within supply chain and outside supply chain also. So in the panel discussion, Anil will provide more detail on kind of how GHGemission tracking and kind of accounting services TRESX is providing. Sorry. So this also will discuss the kind of cost, complexity, and capability challenges associated with that. Lastly, like I mentioned, so all these technology clusters, apart from reducing emissions, are also helping in adaptation and resilience. So for example, if we talk about upstream renewable energy, it reduces irrigation expense, build absorptive capacity of the farmers. Similarly, waste management can generate additional revenue. So from the waste produced in the field, like energy efficiency increases economic savings due to reduced use of electricity. Lastly, just presenting the slide, but we'll discuss more on the key action points. So there are multiple multiple stakeholders associated who are responsible or may in a way could be looked after for increasing or scaling these technologies across agri value chains. First is definitely the corporates, because corporates work with multiple suppliers. So it's kind of requirement from their side to to reach or to provide information about the available tools and technologies to their suppliers and to train them about that. Similarly, define, establish clear criteria for suppliers, kind of provide them training on kind of benchmarks to be followed, and then incentivizing farmers by offering some additional pay or kind of sustainability incentive or payment for economic services. So these are some of the action points. Similarly, for technology providers, there are like bundling is an option, kind of providing finance along with the technology. For example, Sun Culture is providing kind of pay per use or these kind of services for the technology for the solar pumps. Custom made solution needs as per the requirement of the stakeholders. Then government definitely creating enabling policies, engaging with private sectors, mobilizing funds for pilots, setting up incubation centers. Then financial institutes, the support required in linking lending terms to finance ESG scores. Like if a company or a value chain or a farmer or group is more environmental friendly, they're doing more environmental friendly practices, then kind of lending rates could be adjusted accordingly, and introducing some of the instruments like result-based financing, bundling financial instruments, providing blended finance. So these are some of the or patient capital, some of the expectations or action points for the financial institutions. And lastly, for the industry associations, so they are maybe kind of yeah, creating awareness on advantages of adopting available technology, setting up platform, bringing in a stakeholder, creating a consortium kind of thing. So this is just the highlight or to set up the context. This was the last slide, and thank you for patiently hearing kind of these findings. I'll also paste the details, the link of the report to read it in more detail. Now we'll just switch over to the panel discussion mode, and I'll first reach out to Anil from TRESX to highlight some of the activities which TRESX is doing and kind of technologies which TRESX is building on. It includes, so we are aware that TRESX is providing traceable technology for traceability and also across GHG emissions and monitoring. So I'll just request Anil to share some of his thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi. I think that report was quite insightful and very in depth. Thank you for compiling and sharing and walking us through. So it was very knowledgeable as well. One point I just wanted to see, do we have how many minutes for this part of the coverage, so I can just time accordingly and cover that? Maybe 5 minutes, 3-4 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. Great. So at TraceX, we are a company providing a digital connected supply chain, leveraging technologies like blockchain to ultimately provide multiple outcomes. Outcomes could be traceability is one of the outcomes. We also look at providing a digital monitoring, reporting, validation tool set that helps enterprises baseline, measure, and monitor their climate outcome goals. Could be related to sustainability, carbon emissions, and so on. And at the core of this whole, challenge is, how do we ensure the entire supply chain, which is so diverse, so disconnected, how can we, one, digitize, connect everything together, and then provide a mechanism to exchange, create credible data sets, and ultimately help organizations in the supply chain to leverage data to provide multiple outcomes. So one of the key things that we started to work on is on the core ethos of providing traceability itself. And so when I talk about traceability, I'll quickly share the screen so that I can contextualize and explain that a little more in detail. So I hope my screen is visible.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
visible.
Yeah. So essentially, when we talk about traceability as one of the key aspects of, looking at any product from the point of origin till the point of consumption, the entire chain of how it is produced, how it's processed, distributed, consumed, comes into play. And agriculture being a very, complex ecosystem, and then also a majority of our food production happens through smallholder farmer ecosystems. And then where digital penetration is quite low, or the awareness and the technology availability also gets limited in many geographies. So considering that into the play, and when you look at any typical supply chain, you have just taken an example of coffee here, starting from the plantation, where a smallholder farmer is associated to all the way to a cup of coffee that you may be drinking. The chain involves many participants across the supply chain, right? From the producer to an aggregator, to a miller, intermediary, trade agent, exporter, importer, roaster, and distributor, retail, restaurant, to a cup of coffee. And you can see that when you look at the entire chain, not every touch point is firstly digitized. Secondly, there is no incentive for every party to disclose the data in a very transparent manner so that a common outcome can be achieved. And this leads to lack of trust in the supply chains, and very hard to comply to quality and food safety regulations in a very consistent manner, and inability to track and trace the entire chain very consistently. And when you look at this, is the same challenge, very similar, repeated in be it in paddy or rice to to soybean or maize, or commercial crops like coffee, tea, spices, even dairy, livestock, and so on. And when we see that challenge bundled with the, like you rightly pointed out, almost a quarter of the emissions happening through the food and agri sector, the one big challenge in organizations' journey to achieve net zero is also that compounded by the regulations driving how can we measure scope 3 emissions, which are a significant portion of the emissions, almost 90% of the emissions coming through. And how can we accurately measure, how can we set up clear baselines, how can we accurately measure them, and then ultimately report them in compliance to global standards, right? And this, as a challenge, when we looked at it, we saw the opportunity to create a powerful connected supply chain using a blockchain network, essentially a distributed, decentralized ledger of sorts, where we have multiple participants in the chain coming together, and then ensuring that there is credible data sets created for the entire supply chain, from the producer to aggregator, processor, and all the way to a consumer. And that's where we see information which is democratically exchanged at every step in the supply chain. So any could be related to the producer, who is the farmer, where is he located, what are the practices of cultivation the farmer is using, to an aggregator who is aggregating the data or aggregating the produce at through the multiple producers. Where is it stored, under what conditions, how it's processed, and then ultimately, as it moves through the chain, the entire process from logistics till it goes out to the consumer. So you can see that there are opportunities where scope 1 and 2, a large processor is able to manage their warehouse more efficiently, manage probably some of the processes that happen or related to energy, related to their own operation related activities, that can be some of those efficiencies can be driven. But the larger aspect of procuring from a trader or any intermediate supplier to an upstream of ultimately tracking to where it was produced becomes extremely complex, because this lacks digitization, lacks transparency and visibility. And that's where a connected supply chain that we created with our data collection mechanism using our Trace Grow application, which works in multilingual, works in offline, very seamless, connected with satellite or remote sensing, as well as IoT, and also can seamlessly integrate with your ERP and other devices, collecting the data, and then working in conjunction with all the data that already may exist in an enterprise, or using our Trace Pro application, mapping the entire process of what is the manufacturing process that involves the very detailed steps around it, and also integrating the multiple components within the ecosystem using our API services. And also, very importantly, at every stage, how can we ensure there is clear articulation of what is the accounting, or how much of the supply chain activities produce what level of emissions, having a baseline, having a library, measuring those very accurately, reporting that becomes also extremely important. That's where the Trace Carbon and the Trace I modules comes into play. And of course, all of this need to comply to global security, data sharing standards, ensuring that the data sharing and compliance is all taken care in terms of EUDR, GDPR, and SOC 2 and ISO. And then as you see the opportunity of bringing the entire supply chain together, and it is not a single entity's responsibility to make this happen, right? So it becomes very challenging for any single entity to organize the supply chain and work together. And that's where the opportunity, where as a technology provider, we work in participation and collaboration with many all the other actors in the supply chain, essentially an enterprise, a large enterprise, to working with the non-profits who are working on the field, who leverage the technology to do the data collection, or training the producers or the farmers to feed in the data on a regular basis using satellite and remote sensing capability to cross-check the ground truthing data, validate all of these things. That's where it creates a very powerful ecosystem, which leads to credible, trustworthy data sets that can ultimately result in driving particular outcomes, right? And sustaining that also over long term is extremely important, not just creating it, operationalizing it, but also sustaining it in a long term becomes extremely important. And I think these are the actions that ultimately will lead to a very clear objective of helping organizations accelerate their net zero journey ultimately. So I'll pause here and then maybe take up more examples and showcase, maybe a couple of more examples as we go along the way. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Anil, for highlighting the work you're doing and kind of technologies you are currently, working on and already being provided to the corporates or organization you work with. So now I'll move to Sonakshi because she worked in this the corporate and she understand kind of requirement and kind of challenges faced by them. So based on your experience, Sonakshi, with Olam, Nestle, or based on your interaction with the at the global or at the national level, uh, two things just wanted to understand. One is kind of measures with the organizations agri corporates are taking in this space, like kind of engaging with what kind of technologies, and second, what or where do you see the maturity level of the existing technologies? Like, are these technologies are ready to be adopted across the supply chain, or there has to be some kind of more research or innovation required? Yeah, over to you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for the question, Ravi. See, I think, yeah, I mean, everybody knows that technology play a great role, when it comes to any farm level interventions, right? Because you cannot scale up the project until and unless you use some sort of technology, right? Because whenever any corporate do such kind of project, then it would really be difficult for them to go into the field to see the update or to understand the farmer psyche, what exactly farmers are adopting or not, right? It is not possible. So that is why technology play a great role to give them the real time update, right? Real time update. So that is one major element in which all the corporates are using the technology. And in Nestle also, to fulfill our net zero journey, to fulfill our target, the company is very clear that we cannot achieve this target without using any sort of technology. Apart from this, technology also play a great role, apart from just the real-time update, the technology also play a great role in some farm interventions, right? So when we talk about the precision agriculture or the smart agriculture, then also the technology play a great role. So in our one of the live project, we are using the IoT-based sensors, for example, yeah, to fulfill our water management part. And there we are using the technology, we are getting the real time update, we are also giving the training to the farmers, which actually helping them to understand the pattern of irrigation, right? And they are, I mean, this technology really helping them a lot to understand that when there is a need to use the water, when there is a need to stop the irrigation and stuff like that. And at the same time, it also helps the corporate to do the water footprinting kind of exercise by which they can analyze that, where are we last year, how much water usage is there in the field, how much we have saved this year, what more, maybe method or measures that the corporate needs to take in order to save more water in the cultivation practice, and especially if I just talk about rice because it's a water-loving crop. So yeah, I mean, technology play a really great role in every angle of the sustainability projects. I must say, if I just talk about the crop monitoring, then also it plays a great role. We can do the satellite mapping, we can understand, or we can forecast the yield, we can monitor the pest and disease, whatnot we can do. Nowadays, technology can provide us the solution at every angle, at every end. So that's why in Nestle, it is quite important. But if you just talk about me on a maturity level, then yes, I think, we need to do a lot many research on that. Still, there's a more scope of improvement. And, apart from that, we are also facing a lot of challenge in the farmer adoption. Although if the technology is mature, then also the adoption rate is on a very lower side at the farm level because farmers are not very comfortable of using this technology. So at this point of time, it is quite easy to use the technology when we are working with a small number of farmers, because then you can train them and you can give a one-on-one training to the farmers and make them understand that how you can use this app or any solution. But once you scale up this project, once you reach to, let's say, 200, 500, or maybe 1,000 plus farmers, then you need to invest a lot of time in giving a training to the farmers, because it's again a very time taking exercise. And apart from that, I also feel that, if the technology is not mature, then it sometimes just also leads to the data breaks. So, for example, if I just talk about the water smart technologies, then sometimes because of the network issue, sometimes there is a data gap. Then, in that case, you won't be able to complete the study. For example, I talked about the water footprinting study. So, in that case, it is very difficult to see the trends, or to calculate the overall water usage and stuff like that. So, I think there's a lot of scope of improvement is there. But yeah, I mean, technology is helping us a lot in fulfilling the sustainable journey.
Great. Thank you, Sonakshi, for your input. So, in this session, in the first part of the session, I must say, we discussed on the role of technology, how important these are, what are the available technologies, kind of. In next 15 minutes, we'll just discuss on the challenges, kind of models of association between technology providers and the technology procurers, and kind of recommendations. So I'll just start with the challenges. So Anilji, I'll start with you. As you've been working with in India and across multiple other geographies, so what do you see means uh, challenges in adoption of technologies? The challenges might be, you can classify it under financial challenges, like the kind of cost burden which comes along with the technology, and second, kind of implementation related challenges where you have to deal with multiple stakeholders. So
yeah, thanks, Ravi. I think few of those were already highlighted in your report, and also Sonakshi touched upon some of them as we were discussing. I think one of the key things that we have observed is building technology in a way, although initially a bit of challenge, but technology can always be built. But operationalizing the technology on the field and really making it work in a very sustainable, long-term, efficient and effective manner is one of the big challenges that we have seen in the ecosystem. And just for us as an example, there were so many learnings that we went through as we were building our technology, right? And when we initially saw that the adoption of smartphone itself in some of the smallholder farmer networks was not that high, right? Although there were smartphone penetration, but using an app for them was also challenging. So we said, if it was just a feature phone, how can we ensure the communication still happens, right? So there's a local SMS in a local language that is sent out that a person can read to understand what activities needs to be done, for example, this week, so that can be done. There's also voice activated calls that go out and so on. And also ensuring that the mobile network itself in many areas were very spotty, inaccessible in remote areas. So had to make sure the application would also work in offline, and it has to be multilingual. Then it has to be extremely easy to use. So when you think of these factors, and as you start building, you start seeing that each of these lead to small challenges, but as you go along solving for them, and over a period of time, as you learn and solve for it, it becomes extremely as a powerful tool, simple but a very powerful tool set that will work. But also very importantly, the operationalization part of how do we incentivize the farmer to do the right thing and then report on it, because again, going out to the field and collecting the data is extremely challenging. And then in some of the smallholder ecosystems, deploying, for example, IoT sensors at every field level also becomes cost prohibitive. So a combination of what can be done using remote sensing technology, for example, we have algorithms that tell you where the crop crop is not growing effectively, so some intervention can be done with the field officer going there more effectively and addressing that, to remote sensing being able to measure or provide weather data, to even measuring soil moisture, to other parameters remotely, so that information and action related to that can also happen. But operationalization comes with multiple, it cannot be done in isolation, right? It has to work collaboratively. An enterprise's objective will be to ensure there is efficient, cost-effective procurement for long term, as well as ensuring continuous supply. Whereas from a farmer's perspective, the motivations will be very different. How can I ensure there is, from a farmer's perspective, how can they save cost? How can a technology ensure that their work reduces, burden reduces? How can their productivity go up? So when you start aligning these things in a way, many of them have some level of conflicts, and any new technology to try is unproven, right? So a farmer adopting a new technology, being able to be guaranteed a certain outcome is also a challenge. So that's where a level of protection, you can call it some kind of an insurance, that needs to be built into a model, both financially to ensure that if there is any losses, that's also covered up. But at the same time, the right incentive to adopt, use, and continuously fine-tune the technology is also in place. I think this is where we have seen that as a consortium, when multiple parties come together, set up the key objectives, and then take up roles and responsibilities, and then drive the adoption and action, then the entire supply chain output and outcome is more successful and more sustainable. And beyond a certain point, also ensuring that, this is one set of it, but then the regulations also drive that you have to have transparency in your supply chain. You have to fully report on multiple parameters, socio-economic, you have to report on parameters related to your environment, water footprint, as an example, to socio-economic parameters in terms of fair wages, to not using child labor, using sustainable methods. So there are so many layers built on top of everything that is coming together. So that adds more challenges and complexity, and that's where technology can solve, but also operationalizing it with the level of sensitization, training, working together, building the trust among the stakeholders becomes very, very, very important. And we've seen examples where, for example, there was, in one of the examples, there was excess production because the productivity went up a lot, and as a result, the prices crashed, right? So it is also a matter of how do you deal with situations where you're trying to affect some parameters positively, but also that leads to maybe supply chain, supply and demand mismatch in some of those cases. How can you handle those? So unintended consequences can also start coming into play, right? But in a way, the basic things that we have observed is ensuring that you have a consortium, ensuring that there's active dialogue, active conversation happening, trust factors getting built in, ensuring that technology is being incentivized to use, and then everybody benefits positively is a very, very important part of how you operationalize and scale this. Yeah. I'll pause here. Thank you too, and then can take any questions as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Anil. You very well touched on the cost, complexity, and capability aspect of the challenges. So, related to this, I'll just raise similar question for Sonakshi, but just add a context to it. Like considering these agri corporates are working with multiple suppliers, and the same supplier supplies that commodity to multiple corporates. So in this scenario, how difficult or how challenging it for a corporate to, ascertain or kind of engage the supplier to incorporate some of the technology? maybe because there are some complexity involved, which may be the price of procurement. So in this scenario, just to generalize this, like how these agri corporates, let's say Nestle or Olam, deal with the suppliers and make them, to incorporate these technologies which can reduce emission or require change in certain kind of practices, which ultimately they have to deal with farmer and they have to tell them to make changes in the practices or adopt something.
Yeah. See, I mean, this is challenging, and especially the first 2 years, I must say that a very challenging year when you want to make this shift, right? The usual practice which they have been doing like for many years, and then you ask them to shift completely to the technology part. So, and definitely there is a cost component to it, because it actually, and initially they feel that it they need to put more energy, if we want them to make this shift, because they want their team to understand the complete process. They want their team, because again, this is a very risky and this is a very critical one, right? In the first year, they see the whole solution is new for them, and we also can't afford to to make mistake, or they also can't afford to make mistakes. So it's a very first 2 years are really very crucial when you ask them to make this shift. But again, this is what the need of the hour is, because this is how you make your produce traceable, sustainable, in longer run. And that's what the actual demand of the consumer nowadays. So you have to work accordingly. So, but initial years are quite very challenging, and they definitely ask for some sort of premium if you want them to make the shift. And again, answering to your question, when you ask that the supplier, it's also supplying raw material to other food companies, maybe, or the export agencies, then in that case, the company, always want to prioritize the suppliers who is producing the maximum volume to the company, right? So we kind of prioritize basis the volume that we receive from the supplier. For example, if we are just taking 10% of its total production, then in that case, it is really very difficult to ask them, to do this shift, compared to the one from whom we are taking the 70% of his produce. So this is a kind of strategy that we usually work on whenever we initiate this kind of activities with our suppliers. Yeah, but initial 2 years are really very tough. You need them to put, a lot of energy, a lot of understanding, a lot of time. So it's a really very time taking exercise.
No, uh, that's very real. Yeah, can understand the kind of challenges associated initially when we ask for change in kind of practices or introduce new kind of technology. That will be there. So we'll have kind of 10 minutes remaining. So I'll just check with the audience if they want to raise any questions or any kind of suggestion, recommendation. They can put on Q&A or either the chat box. Meanwhile, there's one question I think, Anil, you can take. This is, what kind of networks are you using? High energy networks such as 5G, edge or satellite transmission further increases energy and emission costs. Are you taking that into consideration?
Yeah, good question. See, when we look at, I call it the technology infrastructure layer. When I see that, as an example, in India, we kind of leapfrog the landline revolution. So it kind of went from having to dig up roads, lay long cables, and ultimately connect every town with a cable, and then link a landline with that. We just jumped onto the mobile network, and as a result of it, we see that the digital transactions that is there in our country is significantly high, right? And it's very hard to assess whether some of those things is energy efficient or not, but I can pretty much say that the ease with which everything happens, the commerce itself goes up significantly. There is ability for significant efficiency in operationalizing a lot of these things to and any technology that needs to be deployed ultimately to the grassroots level needs to have that infrastructure enablement. And this is something that we are seeing, that it drives the adoption, and also ultimately in our view reduces the overall cost of adoption, because with scale, what ends up happening, instead of a person having to go and physically record everything, now there's data that is automatically coming in. There's also self-reporting that is possible, and you have a combination of remote sensing that can target areas which are more prone to be susceptible, and then focus your limited energy into those solving for those. So it kind of drives a lot of efficiency overall. But other than that, leveraging tech, for example, as just one simple example for blockchain, we don't use we use a private permission blockchain and not the mining tech, which is a lot more energy intensive. So that kind of reduces the leveraging the energy part more effectively. But also when you see technologies coming in, the adoption also drives how the investment in those areas come into play. And now we are seeing that better quality, more sensitive satellites are being sent out into space, which can measure more parameters more accurately. So we see that as more adoption, more demand comes in, more efficient use of technologies can also be driven, more investments can go into that space, and that's what will ultimately drive more innovation and better use and ultimate scale and adoption as well. So yeah.
Great. Thanks for answering this. So quickly, because we have limited time available, so I'll just quickly switch to the next and final part of this session, which is on the recommendation side. So first to you, Sonakshi, based on your experience again, and if you can give some kind of example which is already you might have seen in the field or in practice within Nestle or outside, like if there any kind of model or apart from that particular case study, apart from that, if there any generic recommendation for more engagement, means to increase engagement across this sector, means between farmers and ecosystem on the technology providers. So first recommendation is how corporate can facilitate this, and second, what are the role other ecosystem players like government or any other like industry association these can play.
So I think, yeah, as Anil also said that, the collaboration is the key in such kind of models. So can you hear me? Or
Yeah, we can hear you.
yeah. So see, number one is that the best way to test this technology is to run the pilots. We can test the technology, by working with, let's say, few number of farmers and understand the challenge and the gap that what exactly farmer is facing. And if adoption is low, then how can we increase the adoption, or how can we change the model by which it is to make it very simple to use for the farmers? Because in my past experience, I faced a lot of issues in understanding the app, or sometimes, what happened that there are too many questions for the farmer, that the farmer face difficulty in understanding those, on giving the answer of those questions. So it has to be very simple. It has to be very, very easy for the farmer to work on. That's number one. And then the role of government, I must say, like I also worked with the government in the past, and especially if I just talk about the Ministry of Ag, then they have their NRLM department, which actually work with the with the farmers, and their aim is to improve the livelihood of the farmers. So they work with the farmers very closely, and their model is to work, to reach to the farmer through their self-help groups. So in the past, how we worked on this technology front, we just asked the self-help group, to first be expert to use the technology, and the training is being given by the self-help group to the farmers, because the farmer can understand the language of another farmer, right? So it is very difficult for a technical guy to demonstrate anything to a farmer, right? So, and if a self-help group woman can explain something to the farmer, then it makes easier for farmer to understand that what the technology is all about. So that's what the model we worked on. So yeah, and apart from that, I think the best way is to first run the pilot and then to scale up the project.
Definitely, given very practical.
Yeah, and the one last thing that I would like to tell, because again, this came from the learning only. So last year when we used the technology for our water for our the water saving project, there we faced a lot of issue on the connectivity front. So it should not link. So there, we installed few gateways, through which these water sensors would work, and the gateways were the charging. I mean, it is based on the solar charger, and then again because of the cloudy weather and because of the some rainfall, we faced a lot of connectivity issues that they through the solar charging it couldn't charge the whole gateway, and hence the IoT based sensors stopped working, and that's how there is a data gap in the whole water footprinting exercise, which ultimately impacted the result. So yeah, that's a kind of challenge, and maybe we can work on to overcome such kind of challenges when the field level.
Great. Thanks for responding to that. So these are very practical challenges, and kind of implement pilot is the key, obviously, where you can test and then scale it gradually. Same question for you, Anilji. What are the key recommendation or kind of key model which you see the best model or kind of go-to model for association or for scaling the incorporation implementation of technologies, and which in context of net zero and those things like answer.
Yeah, I think see, any technology ultimately, the outcome and the proof of anything will mean that either there is more money for the farmer to make, or it reduces the burden somewhere in the ecosystem, and then also ensures that as a model that more farmers are able to adopt. Hence, there is more possibility of scale and adoption and so on. And the reality is also that any technology, for that matter, will always have a cost associated with it. And who bears the cost? Is it the enterprise, and then they pass that on to the consumer ultimately, or is it that the government will come in to subsidize this for a period of time, or drive in more innovation, support more innovation? I think these are things that are being discussed openly in various forums. But I see that the governments are very focused on ensuring that there is more innovation happening in this space. For sure, there's a lot of support definitely available. But at the same time, see, as a model, this is, if you take an organization, an enterprise, which for the last few decades has been primarily sourcing through maybe a trader or a middleman, to suddenly be able to reach to a farmer and really know all of the details, and where they don't primarily have the skill set to go and reach out to that level, right? So they always have to work with an intermediary or a party to be able to provide all that. So do we have enough skill sets, training? So it has to start from imparting that knowledge at the university levels, creating curriculums, creating policies that encourage more innovation in this space, creating policies that encourage enterprises to deeply invest in this, and then enough quality investment from private sector also available to sustain and grow this. So it's a combination of these things that ultimately come into play. And we've seen, for example, each of these is opening up huge opportunities where a village level entrepreneur is able to pick up technology so seamlessly, and similar to what Sonakshi was mentioning, like a Krishi Saki, and explaining that, and ensuring that opens up a new model for revenue, but also at the same time build that with some level of incentive, which you were alluding to earlier. If the data is coming in, you have a subsidized interest rate on or a green incentive that goes in, things like that. I think this is where the entire policy framework becomes very, very important, and it just cannot be the government's mandate to just do that. It has to be a participative model, and I think that is where we've seen those dialogues with the likes of you and IDH and Nestle and Olam and others coming together to form those consortiums to make that happen. And technology will definitely keep better innovations will keep on coming, but in enabling an ecosystem that encourages adoption of this becomes very, very important. I think we've done a good start. Probably the next 2-3 years will be about all about adoption and scale, and then hopefully that becomes the norm and not the exception. So that's what we should aim for. Yeah.
Well, definitely, like you both suggested, the collaboration is the key. So we also look forward to collaborate and associate with more partners, ecosystem player to scale, work on the scaling part. So we have ended up with the time. So I'd like to thank you everyone who have attended this session, and you can connect with us later. Also, I've shared the link. In that link, you can also post your feedback and comments, so you can connect later. And thank you, Sonakshi and Anilji, for connecting and providing your feedback and kind of a practical experience of working in this area. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.